Welcome to the Finer Things podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Ahmed.
This is a show where we feature 2 beverages, 2 cigars, and table 2 topics.
Let's see how fine they are. Welcome back, guys. We're here in the, I don't want to say world famous, maybe. I don't know, famous to me.
Yeah, pretty famous.
Pretty famous. The Ashton Cigar Bar here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. What an honor it is to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's been loads of fun. We were here last night, had fun until a little too late.
We sure did.
Still,
up to about 3?
Yeah, feeling great.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Gorgeous environment. So today we're going to be featuring a cocktail from the Ashton Cigar Bar menu. That would be called the Deep Purple. You have the menu there.
Yes, Nick? I do actually. Yeah, so I can read off exactly what's on there. So the Deep Purple is a Kashi plum whiskey, lemon and honey, and it's in a lavender smoked glass. Just the scent of this when it was being made, the scent of the beverage was just so sweet, so like you smell it and it's just like can't get enough of it. It's
100%.
Really something.
The smoke was pretty pungent, but because it's lavender as opposed to a lot of other types of smoke you see out there, it was a lot more palatable.
Yes.
Super sweet, a little spicy, the way that a burned herb will be. But yeah, incredibly pleasant. And we're pairing it with a cigar.
Yes.
Let's see.
La Aroma de Cuba Noblesse.
Yes.
And this is the Coronation
size. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Came off the recommendation of Shane, who's sort of the house, I'll say, cigar sommelier. Is only in the bar on Saturdays, but you can pop him. He'll generally be here all day on Saturdays up until like 2 a.m. Which was surprising
which
to
was
me.
Absolutely amazing. We got dinner and came back.
Yeah, exactly. Came here, had a cigar, got dinner, came back, and the guy's still here making unbelievable cigar recommendations. Whether it's a single malt or a cocktail or even a wine, they've got a tremendous selection. So it's really fantastic to have a resource like him in the building.
For sure.
Speaking of single malts or whiskey in general, pretty special place to be if you're a fan of that.
Oh, absolutely. Giant whiskey selection here.
Yeah.
Most restaurants would give you a big book of wine. This place will give you a big book of whiskey.
Yeah, which is insane.
Really
It's I don't even know how many bottles. We'll have some nice shots of that we can sort of cut in for you. But the reality of it is, it's the largest collection, or public collection anyway, of scotches and whiskeys in the state of Pennsylvania, which makes it a pretty fun place to be, I think, for guys like us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
good deal. Maybe
without further ado,
open these bad boys up.
Yes.
Comes with a cute little ribbon thing.
Yeah, lots of nice ones too. It's like a fake silk type material.
Yeah.
But part of the tremendous selection they've got here. Trying to tape this tape off with some eloquence. You know what? It slid off easier than that.
Yes, indeed.
Could you cut this for me as well, Nick?
Certainly.
Just an awesome environment. Right in the heart of Center City in Philadelphia, the cigar bar is. But what we actually haven't touched upon is our 2 topics for today.
That is very true.
Let me go ahead and pull those up. So today we are going to be talking about sort of the follow-up to our previous podcast, which is defining the Audiophile Lexicon, Part 2, where we are going to be specifically defining audiophile terms in relation to physical items. So, like, in the previous video, we talked about audiophile terms that people use
to
in
describe
the community
audio. Yeah.
to describe audio. Yeah. That's sort of what the first part was. If you haven't watched that, I would check it out. It was a really fun time. We did Hendrix Midsummer Solstice and Fentimans Tonic.
Oh.
Awesome pairing. I think the conversation we had about the topics was a lot of fun, pretty informative if you're someone that's not incredibly well versed in the community. But generally speaking, I would definitely check that out. But this week, we're focusing on more finite things, less subjectivity, more like, well, that's the name of a product. That's it.
Yep.
So, without sort of more introduction to that,
Certainly.
let's
light our cigars.
Oh
here.
yes. What is the first topic we've got here? That would be DAC. That's a straightforward one. Most people, I think, know what a DAC is.
It's a digital to analog converter. Is what DAC stands for.
Yeah, it's just an abbreviation of those terms, right? Digital to analog converter.
Mm-hmm.
What is it responsible for, Nick?
So essentially, what it's responsible for is taking a signal that is digital in origin and doing a conversion to turn it into analog. So essentially, like a digital source, like let's say you're streaming music off of a streaming platform like Qobuz or Tidal, or let's say you're playing, I guess old-fashioned at this point, compact disc. That information is stored digitally. Effectively, it's digital square waves that have to be turned into analog sine wave form, and that's what the digital to analog converter is really responsible for.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing I was just thinking about as I lit the cigar is like, our concerns when we're filming at home is, no, the room's going to fill up with smoke. Not something we have to worry too much about here. They've got just a fabulous ventilation system, as I guess
really
most cigar bars maybe would. I don't know. I haven't been to too many.
It seems very sophisticated.
It does, because there were 100 people here last night, most of whom were smoking. Big, thick, heavy smoked cigars.
Oh yeah.
And in a matter of moments, that's gone. It's
Yep.
Super pleasant.
We walked in here today before they were open. It didn't even really smell like cigar smoke.
Yeah, not much at all. That's funny. I think our clothing from last night smells more like
certainly
cigars than the entire environment here. And
yeah.
that'll be due to some of the hard surfaces, stuff like that. Most of the materials in the bar are just super high quality, wood and exposed brick and metal. It's a really good mesh aesthetically between modern and more traditional sort of architecture concepts. Not to shill too much. The reality is, it's just an honor to be here, and it's just my favorite. It's my favorite bar. And so the
this
fact
is a really
that
fabulous bar.
it is, and the fact that we're getting to film here, it's an honor. It's we've said that a bunch of times, but I'm talking too much. My cigar went out already.
That's all right.
Well, go ahead and jump on to the next topic.
We can go on to the next topic, the next term here, which is preamplifier. So a preamplifier, or shortened term of preamp, essentially its sole focus is volume control. That is the biggest thing in a stereo system. The preamplifier acts as a volume control. Now, a lot of preamplifiers you'll find have digital to analog converters, or DACs, built into them. You'll find that they have source switching capabilities, so I can plug in multiple things and be able to switch from one source to another, from a CD player to a streamer to a turntable, and some of them might even have phono preamps built in as well. That's another term that I think.
Phono preamp. We'll touch upon that a little later. What are your thoughts on the cigar so far?
Oh, this is very nice. This is it's not too heavy. It's called a medium full,
sure,
if you will. Definitely nice. And let's see here. The country of origin is Nicaragua. However, the wrapper comes from Ecuador, which is very interesting because Shane was saying something to us last night to the effect of that the Dominicans they were very
extreme pride.
Yes, they were very prideful of making their cigars, and it was a big deal to have a wrapper from Ecuador. With the Nicaraguan tobacco, so this is kind of an interesting cigar in that realm.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, no, it's definitely good smoke. Very clean smoke. Not terribly heavy in terms of like extreme palate sort of issues there. Or not issues, but it's not an overwhelming flavor.
No, it doesn't attack.
No, but it is super flavorful. It's not simple. Not a simple cigar.
No. It's got good complexity to it, which is nice.
Wrapper's pretty sweet.
I think few cigars kind of achieve this balance.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of the same with all, I'll say, like, I don't know, nice stuff, where you at a relatively inexpensive price point. And I think these weren't crazy, maybe like $20. It's obviously not inexpensive.
No, certainly not.
But without getting insane. And I think the same thing goes. You see it with coffee, with chocolate, with hi-fi audio.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be good at a couple things unless they're really expensive.
Yes.
So yeah, to your point, I do think that this is a pretty good example of one of those products that is striking a good balance between not being forceful in terms of flavor, not being absolutely in your face, but also not being simple either. It's very far from a one-note type of flavor.
Oh, definitely.
I saw you sip the cocktail.
I did.
How's that?
Oh,
pairing?
it's the sweetness is definitely like it kind of overtakes most of it, but you let it kind of sit and linger, and the cigar kind of comes back, and it's a nice melody between the two.
It definitely makes the lavender smoke flavor linger a bit more.
It does.
It does kind of fall to the wayside the more the cocktail is sitting.
Yeah.
But it gets reintroduced.
It does.
Now, one thing I did want to jump back and touch upon again before we moved on from preamp.
Yes.
Is just how important I think both of us feel a preamp is. Why do you feel like it's so important? Why do you feel like it affects the sound so much?
So, preamplifiers, especially phono preamplifiers, because they're dealing with exceptionally low-level signals, they give you the opportunity to introduce a lot of noise and distortion into the signal path, which obviously is not good. You don't want noise, you don't want distortion in the signal path. And an exceptional phono preamplifier or line-level preamplifier, right? Those will not introduce a ton of noise and distortion into the signal path. They will keep the signal clear. So, I kind of feel the same way about cables. Cables should not introduce noise and distortion into the signal path. They can't improve the sound per se, but you can mitigate that loss and distortion. The same deal goes with the preamplifier, but to a much larger degree because of the exceptionally low-level signals that are being handled.
Let's mitigate the divisiveness of this podcast and move on from cables. But
certainly.
moving on to the next. I keep saying topic, but no definition.
Next definition.
Word
yes.
here. We've got power amp or power amplifier.
Sure.
If any of you watching are really not I would say novice, but new to this, you'll often hear the word amp in reference to amplifier. I don't think that's terribly complex. I don't even know if that required clarification. But why not?
A power amplifier, it's really, in essence, a power amplifier is really like the most simple of what people would refer to as an amplifier. Because when people say amp, they could mean a receiver, they could mean an AVR, they could mean an integrated amp, they could mean all these things. But a power amplifier really
very
is
specific meaning.
Right, really is just taking that signal and bumping it up.
Yeah, it wasn't to say that power amp didn't need further clarification. I just meant sort of amp as a concept.
Certainly.
It's funny. It's really it's early on a Sunday, but they're already getting I don't want to say packed, but pretty
Yeah,
good amount of patronage.
they've got some business.
Yeah, not to sort of break I don't know, break topic here. But the bar is actually open. There are a bunch of patrons behind the movie magic.
Yep, for sure.
And no, it's just always a fun place to be. Of the, I don't know, 4 or 5 times I've been here, I can't help but have a good time. I can't. I was even the last time I was here, I was facing like a minor crisis where I found out the person that was watching my dogs, my dogs didn't like them, and we're giving them a real hard time. And even then, I was just like, I can't be too upset. I'm at the Ashton Cigar Bar. This is the place I like to be. I don't know, kill them, dogs. It doesn't matter to me. No, I kid.
Nice,
but,
nice. Well, okay, so now that we've defined preamplifier and power amplifier, I think it's important that we talk about the next term, which is separates. So separates refers to a sound system that uses separate components, in particular, separate preamp and power amplifier components, right? Otherwise, it would be referred to as an integrated system where those individual boxes in a separate system are built into one chassis. That's really the main distinction there, as far as that goes.
Yeah, sure. I mean that's literally what separate means. That's why we sort of, there's some logic to the progression of the terms here.
Certainly.
A good amount of relation to one another. So a separate system, whether it's for 2-channel or multi-channel, will be made up of just sort of separate signal processing and amplifying components. How extreme you take that, how many amplifiers you end up having, things like that, well, that varies. But that, in a nutshell, is just, if you hear the term separates, that can sound a little vague.
Yeah.
But hopefully that clarifies it. What's the next term we've got?
Power conditioner.
Power conditioner. Oh boy, I thought we weren't going to be divisive. No, but power conditioner. I forgot what we actually. What do we define that as?
I tell you what we wrote down.
Power.
It's a power management device that attenuates noise in the power line.
Sure.
That's the big thing right there. Essentially, the whole idea of power conditioning is really it comes down to, okay, there's noise in the power line. This device attenuates it. You can also have power conditioners that do a good deal of voltage regulation and surge protection as well. But at the end of the day, the big thing that defines a power conditioner is one that is aiming at attenuating those noise levels in the power line.
What differentiates a power, let's say, surge protector or power strip from a power conditioner?
Sure. So a surge protector, it can protect against spikes in the incoming power signal, right? Dangerous increases in voltage, for example. Whereas a power conditioner doesn't necessarily have to have surge protection built in, and a surge protector, vice versa, does not have to have power conditioning built in. So two potentially very different devices that oftentimes you'll find are combined into one box.
That's what I was going to sort of clarify there. Oftentimes, if you're seeing something like that's labeled as power conditioning or line filtering, not always, but definitely often, will also have surge protection capability built in.
For sure.
And most of, I think, the major manufacturers, will give you X or Y guarantee as to, how it'll protect your devices. Obviously, performance-wise, it's all subjective.
Yeah, certainly. So our next term, as if we weren't going to become more divisive, is interconnects, right?
There we go. I think we can abandon the concept that we're not going to become divisive.
Well, interconnect. So it's an objective definition.
Yes,
right, it's an objective definition.
What do we define that as?
Essentially, they're signal wires. They're wires and cables that carry signals between one hi-fi component and another. So, for example, you would use interconnects between your turntable and your phono preamp, or you'd use the interconnects between your preamplifier and power amplifier. I guess the big thing that is not considered an interconnect are speaker wires, right? Which I think we have somewhere down the list here, but we might as well cover it right now. speaker wires are just that, connecting from the power amplifier to your speakers, or from an integrated amplifier to your speakers, right? Those wires that, in their most basic form are just bare copper wires. They're going from the power amp to your speakers, sending that speaker level signal.
Yeah, I mean, in the most basic sense, an interconnect is what it sounds like. It's a it's a piece of wire that, well, I guess not necessarily wire, but it's
wire or cable. I mean,
wire or cable.
Cable is really just a finished off wire, wouldn't you say?
Well, no, you know why I corrected myself there? I thought about optical.
That's fair.
Yeah, regardless, it is a wire or cable or whatever subsection you want to quantify an optical cable, I guess.
We call it. We call it optical cable.
Self-fulfilling answer there. That interconnects connects devices to one another, whether it be a separate system, whether it be connecting a source to some kind of signal processor. I guess power cables, though, would not really fall in that line.
Well, no, because it's not a signal wire per se, right? It's a power and signal we usually separate between the two,
physically and
by definition. So speaking of definitions, the next one kind of expands a little bit more on amplifiers. Monoblock.
The next few do anyway.
Yeah. They certainly do. So monoblock amplifiers are essentially a single channel of amplification. Now that could mean one amplifier per speaker in a basic sense, but some speakers support many amplifiers being hooked up to them, so you could have 2, 3, or 4 monoblocks even hooked up to a single speaker in some of the most exotic setups.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, bi-ampable speakers, relatively commonplace.
Pretty common, yeah.
Yeah.
Triamp, not so much, and the quad amp is very, very esoteric. But
yeah, and I'm trying to think.
You owe me another one of these cocktails.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite tasty.
Bowers and Wilkins Nautilus. I'm trying to think of.
Nautilus is quad amp. Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some others off the top of my head here.
There's some von Schweikerts
that
are quad ampable.
That makes sense.
Yeah, again, very, very exotic. And you have speakers that go the other direction as well, like Harbeth, for example. It's just a single set of binding posts. Alan Shaw, the gentleman who designed them, was very, very particular, saying, you know what, I want you to use my built-in crossover, so you're just going to get the single set of
even things like my Sonys, also not bi-ampable.
Oh, really? Just full range?
Yeah, just full range.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no. It's a positive and a negative, obviously, for the reasons you sort of just pointed out.
Of course.
The negative thing is, I want more amps. I want some more ridiculousness.
I mean, I want more amps too, but my wallet sure doesn't.
Yeah. But moving on. What's our next topic here?
It's stereo amp.
Topic.
Definition
term. That's the word I'm looking for here. Our next term.
Stereo amp is the next term.
Stereo amplifier. I mean, pretty self-explanatory if you understand what mono or stereo is, and I think we covered that in the last.
And
even if we
right.
Mono meaning all sound coming out of one channel of speaker, or coming out of one speaker. Stereo, literally meaning just a pair of speakers,
right? And having
left
that
and a right channel.
right, and having discrete sound between each of the channels. That's a big thing as well, because you could have a mono system with 2 speakers that are playing the same exact thing,
like a multi-channel stereo type.
Right.
Type of deal.
Where stereo, there is distinct sounds from the left speaker, distinct sounds from the right speaker, so on and so.
I guess that would be multi-channel mono.
Yeah.
Literally.
Quite. And then, rolling right into multi-channel, that's our next term, is multi-channel amplifier.
There you go.
So, it's essentially an amplifier that has 3 or more channels of amplification, that's really, at the end of the day, it's essentially 3 monoblocks just in one chassis, 3+ monoblocks in one chassis.
Sure.
So,
what you'll see between a big distinction between a more inexpensive and a much higher end multi-channel amplifier is a discrete power supply, a discrete circuit for each channel of amplification, as opposed to the vast majority of multi-channel amplifying devices, where it'll be a shared power supply for the entire unit, and oftentimes even one IC circuit for the entire unit.
Definitely.
For more entry level stuff. Not to say that that's not usable. But
no. And actually, oftentimes, unless you're running a huge system, it's really not
more than enough.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not necessary. I guess it's good enough, huh?
Yeah.
So our next term is passive speakers. So passive speakers are there are a couple of really key indicators with passive speakers. For one thing, they do not have amplification on board. They are not self-powered. They require an external amplifier, number one. Number two, they have a built-in crossover. Right? Crossover is essentially what it determines higher frequencies from lower frequencies and sends the correct sounds to each respective speaker driver. Right? So a passive speaker, that's the two things. There's no onboard amplification, and you're stuck with the built-in crossover. The next term, though, that we
passive
have...
speakers being most speakers.
Yes, most speakers, generally speaking, are passive for sure.
Yeah.
I'd say probably for the consumer market, 85%, maybe more.
I don't know the statistics, but but probably something like that.
Something like that makes sense.
Now the next topic, much less common, because it is kind of a specific thing.
Yeah.
And that's active speakers we had next. Yeah.
Powered, but sure, we can do active first.
Active for continuity.
Yeah.
But yeah. So an active speaker is going to be a speaker that has the crossover before the amplification.
That is correct.
So it's going to completely separate the signal that's being fed to each individual part of the speaker, typically tweeter and mid or tweeter mid, bass drivers, whatever the configuration of the particular speaker is. But the distinction is before the amplification is introduced. So the signal is altered that way.
That is correct. And really what distincts an active speaker from a powered speaker, a powered speaker simply has an amplifier built into the speaker itself. It could still have a passive crossover where it's amplifier, then crossover, then speaker driver, whereas an active speaker is kind of mixes that up and says, nope, I want crossover, then amplifier, then speaker.
That makes sense.
So that's really the chain of events there.
Sure.
So our next term is subwoofer. Subwoofer is essentially a speaker driver, usually just a single driver, but could be multiple drivers as well, that is responsible for reproducing low frequency registers, subsonic bass sometimes, really reaching down near or below the 20 hertz range. 20 hertz is about the limit of what most people can hear before it's really more felt than.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's an important distinction because those sub 20 hertz sounds, it's not that they don't matter. They matter.
They matter a lot.
That's what you feel.
Oh, yeah.
When you're in an environment where there's a lot of oomph, where you really feel it in your chest, where you really feel it in your gut, those typically are, they can be just loud volumes of above 20 hertz. But the rumble you get in an IMAX theater or Dolby theater
shakes you to the core.
Correct. In the most basic sort of definition, really not even definition, but I'll say layman term, that box you see on the floor that's responsible for the oomph, and again, often paired with like soundbar systems, stuff like that. In today's day and age, but very much an integral part of the home theater sort of music or home theater audio playback realm, but also can add a lot of enrichment, a lot of just value to something like a 2-channel system.
Well, certainly. I mean, a couple things to think about there. Number one, there aren't a ton of speakers out there that are genuinely full range.
Sure.
So they can't reproduce the full range of human hearing, which means the subwoofer is going to help bolster that, provide a foundation, reinforce what the speaker is playing back. But
even for a full range speaker,
a
ton of benefit.
Yep, definitely. And that's the other thing as well. Sometimes in a room where you place a speaker in the right spot where most of the frequencies sound great, sometimes the bass just doesn't sound great in that spot.
It's also about not to sort of cut that off, because that is a really good point. The whole concept of the bass crawl and or sub crawl. I guess.
Subwoofer crawl.
Yeah. But aside from that, the ability to reproduce those type of sounds requires a tremendous amount of power. And that's why, going back to the powered or active speaker situation, most subwoofers, not all, but a lot of subwoofers, maybe 90+%, tend to be powered. So they've got an onboard amplifier. Often they'll have, perhaps a low-pass filter. Some of the nicer ones, a high-pass filter. Really, to define those, low-pass filter, I will not play noise sort of at a certain cutoff and below, as opposed to a high-pass filter. Oftentimes, I will only let sounds of a certain frequency go out to the speaker.
Yep.
The opposites there.
So a lot of subwoofers, they'll have, I shouldn't say a lot, some subwoofers will have a set of speaker terminals for left and right speaker input that comes from a power amplifier, and then they'll have a set of outputs that go to the speakers, so that in a stereo setup where there would be no crossover otherwise, the subwoofer is actively using its built-in crossover to essentially make sure that the speakers are not playing back frequencies lower than they should be playing back. And that kind of transitions us nicely to our next term, which is bookshelf speaker. So,
a speaker that you really want a subwoofer with.
Well, I mean that's a great definition. But no, typically a bookshelf speaker or a stand mount speaker, as it were. Those are kind of interchangeably used. It's a smaller form factor speaker. In order to get it positioned correctly in the room, it requires it to be set on some type of shelf or stand.
Really, it's designed to be.
That's really
because,
the idea.
A lot of people will sort of associate that with more of a diminutive stature. Not always the case. Like, for example, things like, Warfordale Lintons are considered a stand mount or bookshelf speaker. A lot of or those massive ESD acoustics.
Sure.
What were those called? The Pandas or something like that?
Something like that.
I believe the Pandas might have been the larger one.
No, the Cranes were the larger ones. Pandas
you're right. The Pandas were it's small but this big.
Yeah, giant, absolutely giant. Another one I can think of are JBL Synthesis bookshelf speakers. So the JBL L100s, they have a 12-inch woofer. They're considered a bookshelf speaker. They're
really
not considered
cool, classic-looking speaker.
In the Maxell audio ad where the guy was sitting in the chair and getting blown away.
It's an L100.
That's the L100.
Yeah. A lot of those classic speakers are classified because they're designed to be sat on a little stand there. Are classified as stand
even if it's a little stand.
Speaker. Exactly. Even if the speaker's triple the size of the stand.
Yep, that is true.
Like in the case of the Lintons and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and the Harbeth 40.2s.
Yeah. What a speaker.
Oh yeah, really incredible. And that kind of rolls us into our next term, which is a floor standing speaker. So it's essentially a speaker that does not require to be set on any type of stand or shelf. It's already you just put it on the ground and it's ready to go. It's at the correct height. Floor standing speakers tend to be considerably larger than bookshelves. Not always, but that's the tendency. They also tend to be quite a bit more expensive because one of the most expensive parts of making a speaker is the cabinet. Yeah. Right, exactly. So having that and the fact that it's larger, there's more material there. There are typically more drivers built in. There's greater separation there.
One thing to point out, oftentimes if you're staying within the same family of speaker, bookshelves and towers will be not totally, but generally acoustically matched. They're looking to maintain a certain timbre, a certain sonic character.
Sure, like the KEF R3s and the KEF R11s.
Sure.
The R3s are stand mount speakers, the R11s are floor standing speakers, and they both have a very similar sound from, I would say, the mid bass on up. But it's really the R11s, the low bass is where you get more response, whereas the R3s simply can't reach that low. They don't have the cabinet volume or the radiating surface area to do so. But otherwise, they're very, very similar, makes them for very easy matching in a multi-channel system.
But to your point, though, as to what you just touched upon, that's one of the things that makes a floor standing speaker, not always, but to a lot of people, a little more desirable. Big thing, aside from what we just sort of talked about, is they're more imposing, right? There's something about just a big, just I don't know, just in the front of the room, and it stares you down. But to the more technical point that you made, it's also a speaker because of that bigger cabinet. I like to say this a lot. Similar in the car industry, there's no replacement for displacement.
Yes.
A larger speaker is going to have more cabinet volume. Typically, you might have a larger port, more drivers, bigger drivers, and it's going to move more air. Obviously, some things, will break that. Sort of like the DVLA speakers.
Oh yeah, the DVLA Phantoms are absolutely incredible in that regard.
The reactors, quite.
Even the reactors are
quite
something
special. Very, very diminutive size. Really, relative to the amount of sound those things put out. But that's a general rule of thumb. Bigger speaker, bigger sound.
Definitely. And
moving on?
Yeah, moving on. Let's see. We put in a bunch of terms here, but maybe I'll just sum it up as a disk transport.
Oh, sure. Yeah, exactly. So, generally speaking, a transport, again, very specific term, kind of like active. Not as common, but still really, really important. What it is a device that generally is designed to play back some kind of digital media. In this case, we're talking about optical media, like a CD or an SACD, whatever. But the distinction between a CD player and a transport is that there's no onboard digital to analog converter.
Right. No onboard DAC.
Yes. Not a tremendous sort of difference in terms of how you might interact with it. However, it tends to be or can be a huge difference acoustically, because you get so much more flexibility to have the ability to tinker.
Yes.
That's what I love about transports. Aside from a lot of times they sound good, and there's not too many people out there making lo-fi transports.
No. Usually transports are pretty high end.
Yeah, because it's for tweakers.
That's fair. And as far as standalone DACs are concerned, most of them are truly exceptional. You even picked up a DAC recently that sounded great. Maybe it's not the most recent specification, if you will, but it was still an excellent fidelity DAC. That was just a standalone piece, and you could plug a disc transport right into it and play it back. And a bunch of different formats of disc: CD, DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, Super Audio CD, MQA CD. Tons of different formats, and certain transports will play certain formats, and maybe not others. There are certainly universal transports like the Oppo UDP 205. May it rest in peace.
Oppo rest in peace.
But again, it comes down to building out a separate system versus an integrated system. A player is integrated, whereas a transport and DAC tend to be separate.
A trend you'll notice with nice stuff in general, and I say this constantly in relation to culinary products.
Sure.
The more separated you get, the more focused you tend to be on performance. My sort of relation there to culinary products is, a good blender it's made to blend. It's made to be a blender. A good food processor is simply designed to process food, to chop it up, to whatever you're trying to do with a food processor. However, if you buy an all-in-one device, not to say that it can't exist one that does all those things well, but when the stakes are high or when performance matters, nobody buys all-in-one products like that. And you'll notice the same trend in sound.
Certainly.
In a lot of things, in coffee, whatever. There tends to be a pretty distinct correlation between more boxes, more stuff, more sort of, I'll say maybe moving parts or interchangeable parts.
Certainly.
A lot of times more performance.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Not that a one-box solution can't be amazing.
No, certainly. And in the realm of audio, there's this company, Jeff Rowland Design, and their flagship amplifier is called Damon. It's an integrated amplifier. It's fully integrated, so you've got preamp and power amp all in one. it's 1,500 watts per channel. Like, it's insane amounts of power, absolutely insane.
Or like the amplified processor from Focal.
Oh, sure, absolutely, the Astral 16. That's really something.
That's relatively high performance, I think. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, once you reach a certain point, when you're talking about integrating everything, putting everything into one box, there have to be certain compromises that are made that is just like, okay, well, for the sake of getting this all in one box, I'm going to have to SU this or make this smaller than I would really want it to in an ideal world. Whereas with separates, I've got way more space now to be able to, essentially, if I want a monoblock amplifier that sits on the floor, for example, I could do that. And I can have a big box, so giant power supply, a lot of space for my circuits to be properly ventilated, to be properly isolated and shielded from other pieces that might cause interference. Whereas, again, the integrated is just all in one box. So now everything is closer together. Everything is, kind of on top of each other, potentially causing interference, loss, distortion, so on and so forth.
That's the goal, I think, of all audiophiles, is to have as many devices as possible that if you dropped would break the floor. I think that is forget getting closer to the music.
Oh, yeah.
I want as many devices that when someone picks it up says, "What's that made of?" That's what makes me feel good when I wake up in the morning.
Oh yeah, well I do love that. So our next term, let's see here. We covered transport versus player. Streamer is the next term.
Pretty straightforward. A device that pulls basically non-local files, not something that's being played back, in that direct moment from something like a CD or a vinyl disc. Yep. Can be, stored locally. You can have your own music collection.
Yeah, you can have your own server.
Yeah, but generally speaking, in today's day and age, when people are referring to streamers or streaming devices, they're referring pretty specifically. Might want to ash there. They're referring.
The binder is good, though.
It is, but it makes me nervous. Thank you. Wow, you're smoking your cigar faster, man. First time in history, I think. Talking too much, I suppose.
Well, I can take over some of the talking. I'm pretty good with these terms, you might have guessed.
In today's day and age, referring specifically to devices like from, I don't know, Blue Sound or Sonos or Project, so many companies, Cambridge Audio is big in there, but devices that mostly are used to pull music files from subscription-based services like, I don't know, Spotify, Deezer, Qobuz, Tidal, Apple Music, whatever.
Certainly. All right, so our next term is, well, we already covered integrated amplifier like at least 3 other times, so I'll skip that one.
Yes.
Multi-channel processor. So sometimes it's referred to as simply a processor. Sometimes it's simply referred to as a home theater processor, multi-channel processor, either way. Basically what it is a preamplifier circuit for more than just 2 channels. In essence, that's the big thing. It's a preamp circuit for more than 2 channels. Typically, it's designed for home theater use, although you do have some audiophile grade home theater processors, like the Macintosh MX170 is a great example of that, where it's a differentially balanced design, and the sound is just absolutely incredible. It wouldn't be out of place in a reference grade 2-channel system. But then you have more basic items like the Marantz AV7705, which is still a great sounding processor, especially for the money. I think it goes for $2,200 or $2,300, something like that. But still delivers great sound. But primarily, though, it would be used in a home cinema environment where you have a surround sound system, and that's kind of running the show, as it were. That's kind of the big one there.
Yeah, in the most basic sense, it's going to be a device that takes information from a source, whether the source is HDMI or analog or what optical, it doesn't matter, coaxial, and it's going to separate the channels of audio into individual pre-outs on a channel-by-channel basis, so that you can connect them to an amplifier. It's about as straightforward as a definition, I think, as you'll get.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the next one is receiver. So receiver is essentially an integrated amplifier where I have a preamplifier and a power amplifier built into one chassis, in addition to an AM/FM tuner. That's really the main distinction there between a receiver and an integrated amplifier. And you could have receivers that are stereo receivers where it's just two-channel, just like a lot of integrated amplifiers, or you could have a multi-channel receiver as well, which is commonly known as
AVR.
Our next term, AVR. Exactly.
Audio-video receiver.
Audio-video receiver. So,
I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it.
no, we don't. And essentially an AVR is just a receiver that is multi-channel and it has video switching capabilities.
And the AM/FM.
And the AM/FM, right. That's it, hence receiver, right?
Yeah.
So our next term is tuner. So that is...
just the AM/FM.
Right, just an AM/FM tuner. And you can find those in their own separate boxes. Most of the time they'll be built into some type of receiver. But that is legally what makes the term receiver there, is with the AM/FM.
The misnomer, I like to sort of clarify. Look, nobody's going to sit here and tell you AM/FM is the world's most resolving signal.
No.
But a good tuner can make it sound pretty good.
Certainly can.
I don't have too many reservations to listening to AM/FM content, or really FM content, if the tuner is of decent quality.
Absolutely. You know, there's actually a classical station that I just flip on. I have this very old Pioneer receiver. I believe it's from 1976, if I'm not mistaken.
Some of the coolest looking stuff comes from that era, and you're
pretty nifty for sure.
Yes.
But in any event, though, that particular piece has a fabulous AM/FM tuner, like very, very sensitive. You can get it spot on and tuned in perfectly. Where I find that a lot of the newer receivers or some of the processors that I've owned subsequently
sound fine.
They're okay, but and in fact the fidelity of sound is considerably better unless you're using the FM tuner that's built in, and then it's atrocious. It's like, darn, I can't even tune into this one particular station on certain ones. And as I've progressed with the different receivers.
Logic there, I think, that the number of people that were consuming their content from the radio back then relative to now.
Oh, certainly. It's less of a priority now. People now are more focused on streaming from a variety of music streaming services as opposed to tuning in on FM or AM for that matter. Okay, so our next term is turntable. This is a pretty good one because vinyl is kind of making a renaissance here. Which is very interesting.
It's crazy because I feel like, not to say vinyl was dead. Vinyl never died, but
some people would have said that in the early '90s.
Yeah, I guess that's fair because everybody was of the train of thought that CD was couldn't be beat.
It was
perfect.
The perfect format.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. Perfect sound forever. That was the big slogan there. But with a turntable is a device that plays back vinyl discs. There's a bunch of different elements of it which we don't really need to go into.
Sure.
But
in its most basic sense, it is a smooth surface, platter type device. That spins at the correct speed, and has a needle that sort of sends those.
There's a tone arm that you've got a needle at the end of it that is riding between the grooves of the vinyl disc and sending that sound information out, and that's really in essence the turntable there.
So I think that leads well into phono preamplifier.
It sure does. So we've touched on that ever so briefly before, but now we're actually into it here. So vinyl plays back at a considerably lower volume or voltage output in this particular case versus, let's say, a CD, or if I were streaming something, or if I were playing back a Blu-ray disc, for example.
It's lower than line level.
Yes, it is lower than line level. So as a result, because it is so much lower than line level, I can't just plug that directly into a standard line preamplifier. I need to boost that signal first. So hence, phono preamplifier, it is boosting the lower level phono signal up to line level so that it can be sent out to a line level preamplifier or an integrated amplifier that has that line level preamp built in. That's a big one there. Tape deck. So this is another term that I guess is not very popular these days. I don't know too many people that are into cassettes.
And kind of for good reason. Although cassettes are kind of making a comeback in a sense.
They are.
But it's a device that unspools the magnetic tape in a cassette, reads the information off of it, and then respools it onto the internal component of the tape
Correct,
deck.
and that could be an audio cassette player, that could be a VHS player, that could be an 8-track player.
Is VHS referred to as a tape deck? I actually don't know.
Well, that at least when I was in my high school media club, we had
I feel like they say
editing
tape deck
decks.
on them.
And we
it's
did
funny
call
though
them tape
because
decks.
I don't know anyone that didn't just call it a VCR.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But that makes sense. No, I definitely, looking back on it, yeah, it did say tape deck.
And more importantly, the tape decks are usually closed tapes that they're playing back. So the reels are usually encased in some type of plastic, and that kind of rolls us into our next term, which is reel to reel, right? So reel to reel is effectively an open tape deck, where there are open spools of tape that are not really enclosed. It's just bare and there to be touched and tampered with, unfortunately.
But the real positive thing about a lot of reel-to-reel systems is when you're talking about a traditional cassette, the early cassettes actually were pretty resolving, because originally they're really just 2 lanes. There's only 2 lanes of information on that magnetic tape. However, as time went on, people wanted longer and longer playback, more songs available on each cassette,
Yep.
And the result of that is you ended up with these 4 or 8 lane cassettes. And that really, well, every time you have the resolution, and so that's why a lot of the cassettes out there are not particularly resolving.
No.
However, for reel-to-reel systems, that's a single lane of information. It's actually incredibly resolving. It's incredibly high resolution, and it's funny because I think we both, as well as our friend Matt that was with us at the audio show. The New York Audio Show in 2019. Was that November?
Yeah, it was November of 2019.
Park Lane
New York
Hotel.
Audio Show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You should definitely check that out.
Really incredible.
Next time, probably in the Park Lane Hotel again, I would presume.
Typically, yeah. I haven't looked it up for 2020, but I would imagine so.
Probably.
Yeah.
Regardless, a lot of reel-to-reel systems there. So now,
that's making a comeback.
What I would say is, as much as we're speculating that, it's so much more temperamental and so much more expensive than vinyl.
Incredibly expensive.
Like super expensive.
Like
and
$500 an album expensive.
But also the original pieces of content that that were recorded on reel to reel, outside of the ludicrously expensive ones in the thousands, they tend to be just like classical or jazz recordings for the most part. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. I mean, both kind of love classical and jazz
absolutely.
recordings.
And there's some pop, but it's typically.
But there's a lot less market appeal
Absolutely.
for a lot of the content that is
the market
already
itself
on.
is very, very small.
Yes.
The other thing about reel-to-reel that I want to mention is that typically the tape is spinning at a faster speed. It is moving at a higher speed than your typical audio cassette.
Which means it might fail faster. The actual device might.
Not even so much that. I was trying to get into the fidelity aspect of it, because the more tape that is going by that reader at a given time means that there's more information. It's higher resolution. It's higher fidelity. So some of the best reel-to-reel systems were 15 inch per second. Then you had 7.5 inch per second, so on and so forth.
Well, the crazy thing is, folks are making new ones. I think TIAC makes some new ones now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that there are a lot of people that take old decks and restore them and mod them. Maybe.
Somebody.
Yeah. Techniques, I believe.
Techniques. Maybe it's not TIAC. I don't remember.
Have to look into that. Honestly.
Regardless.
Yeah. Either way.
Yeah. The point I was making there, though, is just that there are some companies that are making new reel-to-reel playback devices now, which is pretty cool. It's pretty weird, I would say, but fun. Look, undeniably super cool looking. That's absolutely certain.
Oh yeah.
But we've spent so much time on reel to reel. But anyway,
our next term is EQ. EQ is short for equalizer, right? And an equalizer, essentially, the whole idea behind it is to be able to adjust the response of certain frequencies to kind of even out your playback, or tailor the sound to your particular preferences. So you'll typically have like a multi-band EQ where you have certain frequencies that you can adjust or certain ranges, or in a very basic concept, just bass and treble controls, really, to say, oh, I want more bass or less bass, or more treble, less treble.
But specifically what we're talking about is a standalone or integrated, but a physical device that has equalizer adjustments, not a software thing, like DSP, for example.
And yeah, DSP is digital signal processing, and typically you'll find that within room correction systems. Some subwoofers have DSP applied to their amplifiers to make sure that their response is within a particular specification. Yeah, definitely that's a distinction there between equalizer and then the software-based DSP, room correction, so on and so forth.
What's next?
The next term is room/acoustic treatments.
Okay. Probably the least sexy thing in audio, frankly.
I don't know. Those acoustic panels are pretty nice.
No, I mean like as a concept.
Oh yeah, definitely. Very. It's kind of boring.
No one gets pumped about room, wall treatments as much as they do their amp or their speakers.
Certainly not the average individual. That's for sure.
Yeah. But the reality is really important. If you have a room that's not suitable, it can make it a lot more listenable. And even if you have a pretty good room, it allows you to leave the signal alone, but to make some physical corrections to the way that the sound travels around within the room.
Certainly, that's a big thing, is how the sound interacts with the room, because we hear when a sound system's being played back in a listening environment, we're not just hearing the direct radiating sound from the speakers. The speakers are interacting with the room. They're sending sound all over the place. So if we can control those room interactions better, we can make a better determination as to, first of all, how it's going to sound, but secondly, we can make improvements on how it would be. So less echo, for example, or less slap, or too much absorption versus not enough, so on and so forth. Essentially, just to make the sound more pleasing. What I find is that rooms that are very well treated, they are typically able to deliver better separation in sound, where I can hear individual elements better in a room that has been properly treated. And I will say the very best systems that I have heard have been in rooms that have a good amount of acoustic treatment.
Yeah, and that's no coincidence.
Yeah.
What I would say is, in the most simple way, it's just physical things you place in a room, and not to say that it even has to be acoustic specific. You can hang up a blanket on the wall to achieve something to that effect. You can have a rug on the floor. You can have some nice thick curtains. But all it really is something in a room that mitigates some of the unwanted or what you might perceive to be negative sounds, things that are taking you further from the music, things that sounds you don't want. But moving on.
Yeah. So our next term is banana plugs, spades, pushpin type connectors. And essentially what those are they are cable terminations. So physically the connector that interfaces with a device. In this case, we're talking specifically on the speaker cable end of things. A banana plug is this little plug, and I'm sure we can get some B-roll of this so that folks can see this. But banana plug is basically this type of connector that goes directly in to a binding post on an amplifier terminal or on a speaker level terminal. That's a very nice way of connecting it. The spade is kind of like a little fork that latches on to usually like a post. Where you can kind of screw down and have some tension on that spade. People use spades because, some amplifiers you can only use spades with, but on the other hand, there is more surface area there. So from a physics standpoint, there's greater surface contact.
It's more contact, yeah.
Right. It's better signal transfer essentially.
Yeah, even if we're going to ignore, perceived or even real performance benefits you might get from a speaker connector, like or about to say a push pin,
Yep.
or a spade or a banana plug. It's really very much also just convenience. You can unplug and plug a speaker wire easily. You don't have to sort of get it crammed in the right way, and depending on the type of amplifier, tighten it or pull that little, whatever that would be called, the plastic little pin.
Spring clip.
Yeah, spring clip.
Yep. Yep, that is true. And the spring clip is part of the push pin connector system. A lot of older amplifiers use the push pin style connectors, and
even nice ones, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. My Pioneer uses that, and even the top of the line Pioneer at that time, the SX 1980, which that's a very very valuable amplifier. Sells for quite a bit.
Yeah,
these days
the
it's still
funny thing
like
is,
$3,000 on the secondary market.
I don't know what it sounds like. But I think a lot of people are paying those bucks because they're really pretty.
They are very pretty.
But it's a good a reason as any.
Yeah,
that's a good a reason as any.
Certainly. But they use push pin connectors, and even though it's the smallest amount of surface area, it does seem to get the job done. My Pioneer sounds just fine. I won't say that it's the ultimate fidelity receiver by any means, but for that style piece, it works.
Sure. What's up next?
All right. So our next term are closed back headphones.
Okay.
I guess we could
pivoting away from what we'll call stereo equipment into more headphone specific stuff.
Yeah.
Closed back headphones. Really, really simple concept. Sounds exactly like what it is. It's a pair of headphones. Could be on ear. Could be over ear. Where the sort of outer part of the ear cup is enclosed. So in today's day and age, most headphones are going to be closed back, especially anything you travel with, but all of the most popular headphones. And what it lends itself to, generally speaking, is sound isolation, isolating you from the outside world, but secondarily, a lot of times bass response. You tend to have a really nice pair of headphones to get bass response without it being closed back. Now the sort of drawback to a closed back is a lot of times you are giving up the openness of the sound. Now that's not always the case in the case of the Audiophile LCDX or LCDXCs, I guess
XCs,
specifically. Yeah, the closed back variant. That's still a big, nice sound. In the case of, I'm trying to think of another closed back I like a lot. I tend to like open backs maybe more. What's a nice? I gotta say one more now. Another really nice. Oh, you know what? Honestly, not the most resolving pair of headphones ever, but for what they're designed for, noise cancellation headphones. I love them. When I'm traveling or when I kind of just want to be really separated,
isolated.
Exactly. Those active noise cancellation headphones that they do interesting stuff with the microphones to send opposite signals as to what's going on around. But let's not get out in the weeds. Like the Bose QC35s or the Sony.
The Sony 1000 Mark IIIs.
M3. Yeah, whatever, the 1000 series. They do an excellent job at what they're designed for. But leading into the next topic there,
which is open back headphones, right?
Yeah.
So open back headphones are essentially the opposite of closed back headphones, where the back of the headphone is not enclosed; it's actually open. So the big advantage there is the sense of space, where now you can have sound that is physically outside of your head. That's the big thing with open back headphones. Generally speaking, they have a much larger sound stage, much more expansive. You get better air, I guess would be a term that I would use to the sound. Now, a disadvantage though is that, first of all, other people listening from the outside are going to be able to hear exactly what it is that you're listening to. It can be bothersome to some people, but the other part of it is that there's almost no isolation. So if you're in a busy cafe or if you're on an airplane, you're not going to want to have open back.
If you're
headphones.
in the Ashton Cigar Bar.
Well, yeah, that's fair. There is a good amount of background noise. Certainly, you don't want a pair of open back headphones for that. It simply would be the ambient noise in the space would simply be too intrusive to the music. Whereas something like a closed back or an active noise canceling headphone would be a much better option for that.
I wasn't sure if you did you touch upon the sort of lack of bass response.
Well, yeah, and I guess that I don't know. Like I feel
again, not to say that you can't.
Right. I feel like some of the higher end Grados, for example.
Well, that was my point, though. You have to get an extraordinarily high end pair of headphones to do strong bass response. And again, that's all a matter of perception and taste as well. Some people who like a little bit less bass response will feel that I don't know. Like the HD 600s from Sennheiser, the HD 600s or 650s, the mainstay of Sennheiser for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. Not a particularly bassy pair of headphones. However, very resolving, very big. They image exceptionally well.
And what bass there is, very tight, very accurate.
And, sort of rolling that back for a second, again, a lot of the terms we're using outside of the ones we're defining right now, things like, I don't know, bass response, boominess, high frequency response, imaging, resolution, we defined in the part 1 of the podcast. Not part 1, sorry. The first podcast, which contained part 1 of defining the Audiophile Lexicon. Yep. So this was part 2, where we're not defining the things that we use to describe sound. That's what sort of the first part of the lexicon was about. This is about just literal stuff. A pair of speakers, a receiver, as you've noticed.
Yes.
But sorry, the reason I said that was, if you're not really following or understanding, a lot of those are, head back, watch that video, because I do think it did a good job of rounding up, not all, but most of the terms you'll hear an audiophile or anyone use to describe sound. Because listening to a speaker, listening to a pair of headphones is kind of meaningless if you can't quantify the sound in your mind.
Yep, that is fair. It certainly is easier to express how something is sounding, or perhaps differentiate what one sound is versus another.
Because
if you have the proper terms.
What you end up resorting to is, I like the way that one sounds. Why? It sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I was like that at one point.
Well, sure, everyone's like that at one point.
Absolutely.
Not to sort of downplay that.
Oh, yeah.
But regardless, what were we up to there?
So we're on our final term, which is headphone amp.
Yeah.
So essentially, the big thing is that it's an amplifier that's designed to drive at least one pair of headphones. That's the big thing there. Typically, headphone amps have DACs built in. They have a preamplifier circuit built in, but they don't have to. Like, you have that pair of monoblocks. Are those by New Force?
Yeah. I've got the. Oh gosh, I can't remember the model number.
So much equipment we have.
yeah. It is definitely a New Force piece. Pretty distinct looking piece.
What are those, 4-watt monoblocks, 6-watt?
4 watts per channel. At least for my Odysseys. But obviously the impedance will affect that quite a lot.
Yes.
But super powerful. But they are headphone monoblocks. One amplifier per ear cup. And then also, again, no sort of signal processor built in, no way to change between inputs or sources, just an amplifier, and then I have a separate piece that is a digital to analog converter and a preamplifier in one unit, and that's my little headphone listening setup station.
Yeah.
It doesn't get as much love as it should. As much as
you've been working on your 2-channel setup.
Yeah, as much as I love headphones, stereo, even multi-channel, but speaker systems as opposed to just headphone systems, they are impactful in a very different way.
They are.
But headphones can be just
just
sublime,
wonderful.
and the value that headphone systems tend to offer, you tend to be able to spend like, I don't know, $1,000 and get the level of fidelity you get from a $5,000 or $10,000 hi-fi system.
That's fair, and you're really not so much dependent on the room or space that you're in. So let's say you have a space that is simply not ideal, and acoustic treatments are not an option, so there's no real way to, per se, improve the sound of your room. Well, you don't have to worry about that with headphones. So ultimately, the solution ends up being a lot less expensive. Plus, everything is smaller, so you don't have to worry about the costs of cabinet making and things like that. Right, and it's portable. You can take it with you. That's another great thing. Obviously, a drawback to that is it's kind of difficult to share. Like, you can't share the same experience in the moment.
You end up with this this awkward thing where, especially for me, right? Where if I'm with some of my friends, audiophiles or not, but primarily not, right? I'm handing someone a pair of headphones and then standing there. Sounds good, huh? And then, well, let me listen.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's a little bit awkward.
It is.
When you're trying to share it. And again, that's not the real purpose of a pair of headphones. But, if you're looking for a more personal sort of experience with audio, or additionally, if you don't have the space for a proper sort of hi-fi type system, then a headphone system is a really good way to go about it.
Definitely.
But
so
does that wrap us up?
That wraps us up as far as the
Part
terms
one?
are concerned.
Yeah.
For part one. Going to go with a brief intermission here and come back for part two. If you like what you see, if you like what you hear from us here at The Finer Things, hit the subscribe button, and more importantly, hit the real subsip button, which is tapping that bell, so that you get notifications
You're
of our
going to
new
get sick
video
and
posts.
tired of us hearing us say that, but the reality is YouTube does some interesting stuff with how they design their systems. So if you really are enjoying the content, if you want to hear more, we're thinking about doing a follow-up Audiophile Lexicon Part 3, where we, I forgot, what exactly were we talking about there? Media.
Yes.
Different types of discs, different types
media formats.
of sources,
that's a big
media
thing.
formats, understanding the differentiation, why you might want one over the other one. So we're thinking about doing a piece of content like that. If that's something you want to see, hop in the comments, shoot us an email, whatever.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, all our social media is down there, so check it out. But that wraps us up for the Audiophile Lexicon Part 2 and Part 1 of this episode of the Finer Things podcast. We'll be back briefly.